So let's start at RB16, the aforementioned Alvin Kamara of the Saints, 27 years old. A year ago, Matt, RB5. So if you had to call this one cash, stash, or trash, a year from now, what's Alvin Kamara?
Based on our criteria, I'm going to call him trash, even though I just said you should trade for him. However, that doesn't reflect his production this year. It just reflects the state of the running back position in general. Looking back a little bit, back to 2017, there's only been two running back ones by ADP in July that have been age 28 and older. That was LaShawn McCoy, was 29 in 2017, was running back 12, and Derrick Henry was 28 in this season at our running back 11. And then we have three more that have hit there at 27 plus. David Johnson in 2019, Derrick Henry again last season, and Austin Eckler this season. Other than that, that's it. Alvin Kamara is going to be 28 next season. That to me says there's no way he can increase his value. He's not going to get to that running back 1 status, which would make him running back 12 or better this time next year. So I think he's much more likely to fall. So I'm just going to say trash based on our criteria.
This was a tough one for me. I certainly don't expect him to rise 4 spots. I think we can eliminate that immediately. And actually everybody that we're going to talk about in this group of running backs, again, you think about the 2023 rookies 1 year from now, we know Bijan Robinson is going to be ahead of those guys, probably going to be a top 3 or 5 running back. Jahmyr Gibbs, Zach Evans, Sean Tucker, Tank Bigsby, those guys all have the possibility to be in this range as well. So it's gonna be a tough task for any of these running backs to gain 4 spots in that running back ADP. I don't think Kamara does it, but I also don't think he drops 4 either. I'm going to call him a stash. I think he basically stays within the same value range, in part because of the production Matt mentioned.
I have a hard time thinking he's going to be outside the top 20 at running back because, like I mentioned before, 9 of 13 games in the top 16, really dominant for stretches of last season, a couple of number 1 overall type finishes. He's carrying dynasty managers still. I expect him to do that throughout this season, and people won't give up on him. I'll say he is a stash as well. This is a fun conversation. Aaron Jones, similar age. He's about 27 and a half. Last year, he was RB15. Right now, he's RB17 in July ADP, Matt. Last season, finished as the RB10, a top 24 running back in 11 of 15 games, and had 4 RB1 finishes. So what do you think of Aaron Jones finishing in this range next year? Cash, stash, or trash?
I'm going to call him a stash because I think his season is just going to be so good that even despite him, being 28 and a half year old at this time next season, that he's going to be in this mid to late running back 2 range. Kick him down to 24 if you want, which I guess would qualify him as trash. But I think he's going to be in this like 18 to 20-ish range. After he has an incredible season, if for some reason he doesn't get any a lot of touchdowns, most of those go to AJ Dillon. His production isn't necessarily as high as I think it's going to be, which is the top 5 to 6 range at the position. Then I could see him falling farther than that, but I think he's more of a stash.
I can't see Aaron Jones finishing 2022 with less than like 65 catches if he plays his 13, 14, 15 games that we expect him to play. And that kind of production in the passing game to go along with 190, 210, 215 carries on the ground, including that big play potential that we've seen him have in an offense where I think it's probably pretty fair to say, guys, Aaron Jones is the biggest playmaker on that offense right now. He is set up to have a magical type season, maybe even a high-end RB1 type season. That all said, 28-and-a-half-year-old running backs do not stick in the top 20, as Matt said earlier with his Kamara analysis. I'm surprised you said trash with Kamara and stash with Jones, because I'm going to go the other way. There's questions about his contract in Green Bay, how long he'll remain there. Even with a big season, I could see him falling outside the top 20 pretty easily. So I'm going to say trash reluctantly.
Yeah, I had him in the trash category as well. Although I agree with everything you both have said. I do think he's in for a big year, almost by default because of the way Green Bay has built that team and their offense. But again, we know the rookies are going to be ahead of him. We can expect maybe a young guy or two to jump up ahead of him. And I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I think one of his own teammates could jump up ahead of him as well.
Kenneth Walker III is one of those young guys that could potentially catapult some of these veterans as well. He comes in at 18 among running backs in July, 21 and a half years old. Ryan, your thoughts on Kenneth Walker?
Well, the age is obviously on his side. I think he's the youngest player that we'll talk about today, the only rookie, I believe. That said, he's got some tough competition this year with Rashad Penny. I don't love the situation. We've talked about him on here before and said some of those same things. So I think the age gives him a little value insulation, but I don't expect him to jump 4 spots necessary to call him cash. I will call Kenneth Walker a stash.
I'm going to call him a stash as well for all those reasons you mentioned. And I'll add on, for him to be cash, he has to be like a top 16 running back this year. He has to put up that kind of production, or at least do that in a stretch over the second half of the season. I just don't have that much faith in that offensive line and that offense in general to create that kind of opportunity for him. Although I have a very hard time seeing him fall more than 4 spots. That would take a catastrophic type season. He's a stash for me as well, Matt.
Yep, stash here. Pretty much everything you guys have said. I think he has cash potential if Rashad Penny is the normal Rashad Penny we think of, and playing half of the season or less. I think he certainly has cash potential there with Kenneth Walker. And I like to see him at running back 18 a lot more than I like to see him at running back 14, which is what he was last month. So he's a stash, but I think there's a scenario there, an easy scenario there where he could be cash.
Antonio Gibson is running back 19, 24 years old. Flashback a year ago, guys. He was the RB10. Some of that was on potential. We were expecting big things from Antonio Gibson in 2021. And honestly, he was pretty good. He was the RB8 last year in the entire season, but a lot of that came from playing all 17 games. Pretty productive across those 17 games. 5 RB1 games, but 5 games also where he finished as the RB30 or worse. So a little bit of Jekyll and Hyde. We're not really sure what we're going to get with him. Now there's some competition, or continues to be some competition in that backfield as well, with the young tailback that they drafted from Alabama, as well as, thank you, Brian Robinson, as well as J.D. McKissick back in Washington as well. Just 24 years old, as I said, Matt. Your gauge on Antonio Gibson?
I'm gonna stay with stash. The guy has put up back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, and he's just 24 years old. I think if he falls out of the running back 2 situation, which is what we're talking, close to what we're talking about, if we're going to call him a trash player, it would put him at, he'd have to finish at running back 24 or worse. So I think he's going to stay right in this stash range. I can't see him falling into the running back 3 range.
So here's the thing with ADP and with dynasty players is, like, once we make a decision on a player, it's really tough for us to change that. We've talked about that. I've talked about it with Leonard Fournette. His value just fell off the map. He dropped so far a couple of years ago towards the end of his time in Jacksonville. We've seen Antonio Gibson, as Dan mentioned, fall 9 spots among running back rankings over the past year, running back ADP from RB10 to RB19. I would honestly, I hate to say it because I loved Gibson as a player a year ago, but the way they've built that backfield unit, it feels kind of like what I said about Josh Jacobs. J.D. McKissick is a better pass catcher. I think Brian Robinson is going to be a better short yardage option. So where does that leave Antonio Gibson? He's trash.
He's trash for me too. He's got to have a goal line role or a pass catching role. A year ago, Gibson caught 42 passes, 3 touchdowns, almost 300 yards receiving. And sure, if he can match that production again this year, that would be great. But it took him all 17 games to do that. And it took a big on-field percentage for him to do that as well. He was on the field a lot. And I just don't see Washington wanting him to be on the field all that much again in 2022. Let's move on to another tailback that played all 17 games last year and therefore finished as the RB7. that can't be Zeke, right? Everybody hates Zeke. Well, Zeke was the RB7 a year ago for the Cowboys, 27 years old now. So a lot like Kamara, a lot like Aaron Jones, who we talked about. A year ago, flashback 12 months, Ryan, he was the RB9 in our ADP. Now RB20. Is he going to hold that value through age 28?
No. I mean, there's so many Zeke haters out there already. I do expect Tony Pollard's role to grow. I'm definitely not giving up on Zeke. I do expect a pretty productive year, but the value is just not going to bounce back at his age with a declining role. He's in that trash category as well.
Yeah, I think there's a chance he would be outside the top 30 potentially. I completely agree. And you know, it's not because Zeke's not a great player and plays through injuries and all those things. His age is getting up there, and he's really one tweaked hamstring or injury that forces that production to be downhill for even a stretch of the season away from losing up to 10 or 12 spots in our ADP, man.
Yeah, it feels weird to say that for a player who's missed 2 games in the last 4 seasons, a guy who goes over double digit touchdowns twice in the last 4 seasons. And I think that's what it's going to take again for him to really even be on our radar as somebody who we might want to plug into a flex spot next season. You know, I see him and Pollard scoring, like the total point number that they both put up at the end of the season being similar, just Zeke doing it a little bit different way if he does come through in the touchdown department. But if he doesn't come through in that area of our game, then I think Pollard's going to outscore him and be worth more than him next season from a average draft position standpoint. So got to call Zeke trash